Our sponsor this month is Published, an affiliate of Village Voices. Published offers all author services from writing tips, critiques, manuscript evaluations, and editing, as well as tips to help you become published. If you prefer to self-publish, purchase the step-by-step book on publishing through Amazon, or purchase services a la carte, from formatting to creating custom covers, or even tips to gather endorsements. The staff is headed by 2 professional writers. After your books are published, either trade paper, electronically, or both, purchase marketing tips, web services, book trailers, or turn your book into an audiobook. Publish provides all your writing, publishing, and marketing needs. So give them a call at 941-748-6865. Contact them online at dgould497@aol.com, or go to the website at www.publishedavillagevoices.webs.com. Good afternoon. Welcome to Culture Coast. The intro you just heard was by Al Musitano, and today we are interviewing author Mary Manilla. Hi, Mary. How are you?
Fine, thank you, Donna. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you have one book published and a few more in the works, correct?
Yes, I just recently completed a book which is a comedy aimed at women and baby boomers, and it's called Swimming to Rikers Island. And then now I'm in the process of researching and writing a third novel, which is set in the Seminole Wars, and its working title is The Unconquered.
And that's because they never signed a treaty
Yes,
with the U.S.?
It's just fascinating. So much that happened here influenced our country and absolutely reflects our character. And I just
Not
think
always to the good side. There's
No.
a lot of our government that's rather domineering.
Yes, in fact, Andrew Bloody Jackson, as they say, he plays a very important part in this.
All right, now your first book, this Foretold, you tell us on. Well, let's start back at the beginning. When you were growing up, were you planning all your life to be a writer? What did you want to be when you were a little girl?
Well, when I was a kid, I was a reader. I read books incredibly. And I never really thought about what I would be in life. I just read a lot. And when I was about 14, my mother said to me, you know, Mary, you ought to start thinking about
What you want to be when you
what
grow
you
up?
want to be when you grow up. And at that time, you know, weren't many choices available. You could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, or you could be a secretary, as my older sister was. And as a secretary, I tried working part-time when I was a teenager after work to get money for my prom gown. I was terrible. I got telephone messages mixed up. Oh, God. I mean, they begged me to leave. You know, they cried. They said, Mary, it's not for
We
you.
love you, but
You're a nice girl, but forget it. Nurse, I couldn't even send a needle. And, you know, to get me to the dentist, you'd have to tie me and drug me. And so that was out. And then being a teacher, I just didn't have the patience. And so, but I did read the comics. And there was a comic strip called Brenda Starr.
oh, I vaguely remember that. Two R's in her name.
Right. So there she was. She worked for a major metropolitan New York City newspaper. But you never saw her
And then there was
work.
Lois Lane.
Yeah, oh yes, but let me tell you about Brenda Starr, who was
Okay.
a bit more glamorous, because you never saw Brenda work. Maybe once a year she had a big, and of course that made her famous. It was a front page story. Everybody knew Brenda Starr. She always had incredible, handsome, wealthy men running after her, including one called Boris, who would send her black orchids. And when things went wrong in Brenda's life, she would throw herself across the bed. And you knew she had a bedroom in a penthouse apartment because you could see in the background
Central
a
Park.
big terrace and the tops of skyscrapers. And her maid would be standing there in a beautiful uniform saying, now, Miss Brenda, it's going to be all right. And she would go out and she would buy a whole new wardrobe and get a new hairstyle. And I thought to myself, well, if you have to work in life, this is the kind of job that's
Why doesn't
there.
everybody do that?
Yes.
So you became a reporter?
Yes, and also I
How
thought,
did you start that?
well, it was very funny because...
You went to college?
Yes, I went to college and I was editor of the school paper. And I went to college at Hofstra University, which is on Long Island. I had 2 years actually at New York University because they had a fabulous journalism department. And Hofstra had been founded by NYU. And it was it was one of the top 10 small private liberal arts colleges. So I went there and I became editor-in-chief of the paper. And the big newspaper out there was Newsday, which was the 13th largest newspaper in New York City, and of course it reached the New York City metropolitan market. So when I graduated, I desperately needed a job. I think I had $10 to my name.
But you didn't have student loans.
Oh God, please, but not think about that. But I found out that the editor of the paper had lunch every day in a Chinese restaurant nearby in Garden City. So I would go every day to that restaurant at lunch and I would buy a Coca-Cola and sit at the bar. And pretty soon people would be talking to me. A lot of the reporters from Newsday would come in there for lunch and I would say how much I wanted to be a journalist, a reporter, and I was hoping to get a job on Newsday. So pretty soon they started bugging the editor. There's a kid here like to have a job and she really seems like a go-getter. And finally, the owner of the restaurant went up to him and said, why don't you hire her? She's a very nice girl. You hire her. So one day, he came up finally to the bar and he said, I want to eat my lunch in peace. Report to work Monday at 9 a.m. And that's how I got my first job.
Everybody else pushed you and got you into that. That's so cool, but you let everybody know. So that's kind of that vision thing. I want to be this, and you let everybody know, and it happened.
Yeah, and I think that
you did have the background and experience.
Well, I
for
studied it, and I showed that by working in the student newspaper, I showed that I, really had a commitment. But
so
it was
what
just
paper
determined.
This was the 13th largest paper in New York City.
Newsday in Long Island. Wonderful paper, wonderful paper. Bill Moyers was the publisher.
How long did you stay with them, and where did you go from there?
Oh, well, I was there several years, and I had just been promoted to senior feature writer. It's like being the queen of the city room. And I had also just been nominated the second time for a Pulitzer Prize.
Wow.
So I was being...
How many years is this? And you've already gotten nominations
Yeah,
twice?
in fact, the first Pulitzer Prize nomination, which I should have gone but at that time, I was like the only woman in the room. Because I was the first woman I wasn't allowed, I took them. The same test given to the astronaut test. And the whole purpose of the series was because they were refusing to let women in NASA's space program. And I took those tests to prove that women, and they kept saying, women can't take it, it's too strenuous for them. And I took those tests to prove we could. And the results of my tests were as good as any of the astronauts and better than most. And John Glenn coached me.
That's neat.
Yeah.
So you wrote an article then. How many years have you been in the business at that point?
At that point, I was in the business 9 months.
Wow. First nomination for a Pulitzer.
Well, what happened is that when
year?
I reported to Newsday Monday at 9 a.m., they sent me to the women's department, and I was given the job of writing the calendar. The daily calendar. So you would get all these letters, the Garden Club of Syosset, and you had to call every one of them and check and make sure you had it accurate because these were...
It had to be at the right time,
Right.
place, and everything.
And I was, this is not what I wanted to be. I wanted to be Brenda Starr.
And have that penthouse apartment.
And the maid. And don't forget the new hairdo.
And the new wardrobe.
And Boris. So I was... reading the newspaper, and they were planning, they had the astronauts, and everyone was talking about space. And it sort of occurred to me, gee whittakers, that might be something I'd like to do. I'd like to go. Why don't they have any women astronauts? So
you were at the very forefront of women's living.
Oh yeah.
Without a doubt, you were the front lines.
Oh, and let me tell you, it was not a good place to be. They give you a hard time. So anyway, I mentioned it to my editor, and they got so excited. Oh boy, what a great idea for a story! So they started writing letters to Washington D.C. and everything, and this went on for a couple of weeks, and everyone was saying, "Oh, you're crazy." And all of a sudden, we got a phone call from the air saying, "Okay, send her down to Washington D.C., the big Air Force base down there, and then we'll fly her out to Wright-Patterson." So you can imagine my editor.
And you're what, 19 years old?
Oh yes, yes. That was just probably why I was so physically fit. And so the big send-off, the publisher came out. Good luck, Mary. Do us proud. So off I go. I get on the plane. I fly, lands in Washington D.C. And there's a young man there, very primly, properly dressed in a suit, and he's there to greet me. And he's from the Public Relations Department. And he said, they have to remember at this time I was a cute kid, and I was built. So he says, he greets me, and then he hands me a letter, and he says, I just want to show you this letter. We're going to let you fly you out to Wright-Patterson, and you can interview the women who prepare the food in the little tubes that the astronauts eat from, but otherwise, you're not allowed to take the test. So he gives me a letter, and I read it, and it says, I can talk to the women who prepare the meals, and I could take the waitlist test because civilians have taken that test, and it's been okay. But everything else, forget it. You get. So I look at this letter, and my first thought is
anger, because that's not what you were told.
Well, no one had said anything about the test. They just said fly her down, and everyone assumed that when they were flying me to Wright-Patterson, it was so I could take the test. You see, but when I got there, this guy is telling me, no, we're going to fly you there, but you can't take the test. So my first thought, of course, is, could you imagine after this big send-off? I'm going to go back and face my editor, who was a big, tough, big cigar-smoking guy, and say, oh, well, they wouldn't let me take the test. So I look at my clock, and I said, the plane that leaves for Wright-Patterson, and this letter would be part of it, would be mailed on it. Yeah, they were going to mail it. And this, I think, was a Wednesday, and it was like 3 o'clock. The plane left at 6. So I tucked my arm into it. I fluttered my eyelashes, and I said, I have never, ever been on an Air Force in my entire life. Would you show me
Long
around?
Island, you're using a southern accent.
Oh, my God.
An actress, too.
Did. So this guy, his glasses fogged up, So he said, he took me around, and he said, oh, no, take me over here. And I did this so he wouldn't have a chance to mail that letter. Because I was figuring, if he didn't mail it today, Wednesday, he'd have to mail it Thursday. Then the mail office wouldn't get it really until they would send it out Friday on the plane, and it would land in Patterson Saturday morning. And by the time, no one does anything Sunday. So the commander of Wright-Patterson that I was supposed to go to, he wouldn't get it until Monday morning. So I kept him busy at 6 o'clock, and bit of a fad, and I got on the plane, and it was great. The guys were great. The pilots said, they didn't even let me sit at the controls. And I land there, and I'm greeted by another PR man. They take me to the office this day, and the next morning, they bring me to the commander of the base. And he said, well, I was told to expect you, but I don't even know why you're here. And I said, oh, well, I'm here to take the bathroom test. Oh.
You've got to that funny.
That's ridiculous. No woman has ever taken those tests. I said, what do you mean? This is ridiculous. Call my editor. Call Washington. Call the president. How dare you say it? And I started raving and ranting and going up and down, and pretty soon I was so loud, and the word got around the entire base, and finally at 11 o'clock, 11:30, he calls in the PR guy. He says, "Take her to lunch, for God's sake." And I wouldn't leave the office. I kept saying, "No, no, no, I'm here to take the test. They sent me out."
When is the
Why
test?
do you think? Yeah, we're in the test. So, and he doesn't know what to do. So they take me to lunch at the officers club, the PR man. And when we're sitting there, this man comes over and he says, "I understand you said you're out here to take the test." I said, "Yes, of course. That's exactly why I'm here." He said, "Well, my name is Dr. Gold. I'm one of the doctors who's in charge of giving the test. I'm in charge of the heat chamber, the heat test, where you sit for 3 hours in a room at 180 degrees to see if you can withstand the heat of re-entry." I've always been curious as to whether how women would react to heat versus how a man does. So I said, "I'd love to take the tests." So right away, right after lunch, we went there. I had to wear the same clothing that the astronauts did, so the crotch was like
Really
my
low.
knees. But I had to wear, it was like long johns, but they had wires all through it. And a headband. Everything was so big for me, and the shoes, everything. But they all had electrodes in them so to measure the temperature and everything. And I can remember I had a sort of shuffle from the dressing room, and there was this gauntlet of all these enlisted men gaping at me, and the word got around the whole base. And I remember they would stand outside this window looking in, drinking. So they put me in a chair in this, it looked like an electrocution chamber, And I'm sitting there, and they brought me some magazines to read, and I couldn't even read them because the paper got so hot, it burned my fingers.
Ow.
And I sat there, and every once in a while, Dr.
But you were wearing gloves.
Nope. You had to be, nope,
Wow.
bare hands. And I had a headband and wristbands, and Dr. Gold would come in every once in a while. Now it's 180 degrees, just to see if I was still coherent. And at one point he came in and he said, "You're either dead or your internal thermometer has blown out." So they had to put curtains over the window, and the internal, I inserted again to measure the internal temperature of my body. Finally, it's over, and Dr. Gold was fascinated by the results. He said, "Your body temperatures were higher. If a man had temperatures as high as you, he would pass out. On the other hand, even though you had those higher, you were fine. You breathed through those tests just as well as any of the astronauts. You certainly can withstand that." Well, the results of that test...
Which meant now they wanted to test you for the other stuff, too.
Right. They all said, "Oh, wait a minute now." So all the other
now they've got an experiment in research to do.
Right. So I got all and the astronauts had taken these tests over a 3-week period. I had to take them in 3 days before I had to take them before Monday morning.
Before the letter showed up.
And they kept saying, "Well, we'll give you the wait list this test." And I said, no, let's have the other. There was a heat test, a cold test. They have, they tested your stamina. You had to jump up and down.
Now, were you much younger than most of the astronauts that were in the program?
Yeah, I guess.
So that might have also been a
it might
factor.
It might have been. But then I took them all. That I had the isolation chamber in which they said, which was light proof and soundproof. I remember still a line I used. I was in awareness in the dark. That's really, you feel almost like you're floating. But I was so tired I fell asleep for the whole. So I passed that test with flying colors. They said, "We've had people in this test. They failed. In 30 seconds, they came screaming out of that room because."
And you just went to sleep.
And I went to sleep. I felt like that. Man, but I was so tired.
That's cute. So where did you go from? And then still at the same paper, you had another Pulitzer nomination.
Yes. Then this was for civil rights.
And now you've been working for them for 8 or 9 years.
No, 7 years, and that's when I got the.
And what was that one for?
That was for civil rights.
So the first one was for women's rights, and
yes.
the second one is for civil
Yes.
rights. So you're obviously a rebel.
No, I'm for the underdog, which is a great American.
And you were in the midst of the the civil rights movement had already occurred, and you were in the midst of the women's movement.
Oh,
now,
yeah,
right?
and the riots. I mean, I covered those riots. I was in the middle of them. They were the Harlem and Newark, and oh my God, yeah, they was, you know, well.
Lots of stories to write. So you're writing for the paper. Where did you go from there?
Okay, well, I was being interviewed on television, and someone at CBS TV News saw me, and they'd been thinking about a woman, a correspondent.
They didn't have any Brenda
No,
Stars?
there was not. There was no on-air
Wait a
women
minute. Brenda Star's a newspaper thing, and yet there were no real
No.
women reporters out there.
No, not yet.
No Connie Chung,
So I
Barbara
was
Walters?
no Barbara Walters, but she wasn't really.
She was doing
She was
fluff.
a talk show
She was doing
person.
fluff.
Yeah. So and I knew Barbara. She was a wonderful woman. But you see, just to show you how unfair it was, they were terrible to me. The unions really worked to destroy the footage I was getting in an effort to get me fired. And their attitude was they didn't want to work for a woman, and they didn't want to take orders from, certainly not one young enough to be their daughter. And they really had a plot, and except for one loudmouth who said, we're doing deliberately screwing her up, they were about to fire me because everything I did somehow was.
I've spoken to others who had
Yeah.
a similar experience. Ruth Cade, who sold me this gallery, she was I think she was with CBS too.
Oh yeah, they
And
were.
she said that it was. Now she took a direct opposite path than you. She was very conservative, but she was also getting a lot of flack for being
being a woman. I know
for being a female in a male-oriented business at the time.
It was terrible because I used to go around quoting.
But you didn't get fired. You stayed with them.
Yeah, I stayed with them, and and the irony was I didn't really care about being an on-air correspondent. I went to television because I wanted to do documentaries. The idea of putting pictures with words, I thought would be wonderful. I wanted to produce documentaries, and so I didn't have the
Did you
the
go in
ego
that
for it.
direction at any
Yes,
time?
I did.
Yes, you did.
And I won 28 awards for my documentaries, and I became a producer on a TV news magazine program, and with Olive Weston.
So you had a
who
wonderful
23,
career.
and
The
so I did
documentaries,
that.
you wrote the scripts for them, basically?
I did. You see, that was another thing about being a woman, and how I met my husband. The guys would, let's say I was at a fire, or covering an explosion, and I'd say to the cameraman, "Oh, get footage of that explosion." And he would take pictures of the clouds and the trees, So I decided I was going to study film production so that.
Now, what
I
brought you
could
to
say to
writing
God,
novels? Now, all your life you've written nonfiction.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I never even.
What did you read all your life?
Oh, I have eclectic tastes. I mean, I love Kurt Vonnegut. I love Patricia Caldwell. I love Steve Barry. I love Baldacci. I love De Silva. I love Janet Ivanovich.
Oh gosh, yes.
I mean, I just read them all.
And you've written,
And I love
you
science
write the
fiction.
same way.
Well,
you write a little bit of this and a
yeah.
little bit of that wherever your mind takes
as a
you.
journalist, one day you could be covering politics, and the next day you'd be covering a birthday party for a 100-year-old man or something. So you had great variety because every day was different, which is one of the nice things about news. You never
It's
knew
one
what.
of the nice things about life.
Yeah, it was never got boring. And so that's why, if something, I just get an idea, because some of the best stories you get are the ones you stumble across.
Right.
You're like, oh.
You have one book that you haven't mentioned, and then I want to get into Foretold,
Yeah.
because that's the one that is currently published. You also were writing something about a Hamlet book with a woman whose husband died.
Oh yes, this was inspired. I had an old friend, Rita Moreno.
Okay.
She's a wonderful woman. There are so many women who find themselves financially strapped because when their husband dies. So I wanted to write so I wrote this book called Swimming to Rikers Island about a famous Broadway star. Her husband suddenly dies. She discovers she has not only can't fund their
She's
little
broke.
savings, everything. Yeah,
Everything that
everything
they've
has
worked for all their lives disappeared.
and she finds this out so she's moaning and crying and walking along the East River, and two kids pass by, and one kid says, you behave yourself, and he points across the water to where this big
Rikers Island is.
Rikers Island says, or you'll find yourself there. And the kid says, listen, I have a friend who went there. He said it was great. He got 3 meals a day, had a good bed. They had job counseling, a library, a gym, movies every
Doctors.
Saturday night, cable, and he got a whole new set of teeth out of it. So the kids go, she jumps in the river, So the next day, the kids rescue her, actually. They bring her to court, and the judge says, suicide is a felony in New York. And she said, Your Honor, I was not trying to commit suicide. I was trying to swim to Rikers Island because I could get my 3 meals a day and best of all, free medical and dental and all these things. So that's the basis for the story.
It was cute. It was very cute. Now, tell us what Foretold is about, because this is not a humor book.
This is a story I covered when I was producing a TV news magazine show.
Doing your documentary.
Yes, and I became obsessed with it. I was covering, it's all about the government's plan to build a repository, they call it, for high-level nuclear waste under Yucca Mountain in Nevada. Where they were going to do the repository on the Yucca Mountain was the 3rd most active earthquake zone in the United States. And many scientists, there's a huge aquifer of water, an underground water source, from when that area was a sea, and the Jurassic swamp. So all that water was trapped underneath the water. And there were 33 fault lines in that area, including 3 that went right through where they're putting the tunnels. And there's also still 10 active volcano cones. And they're saying, and they even, these geophysicists from the University of Colorado built a model to show how if there was an earthquake, those fault lines would open and close, and they would act as free flow channels. Water would get into the tunnels where the nuclear waste was stored. You see, the Hopis believed they're the first people on Earth, and they were appointed guardians of the world's safety. And they were given 9 prophecies in order to fulfill their responsibility. And the 9th prophecy says how this world will be destroyed. It's a hell of a story. Of course, I can't write it with a newspaper story, but it just obsessed me because I thought it was so stupid when the government went ahead and built the mountain when everyone warned them it was the worst place they could pick.
So you felt that this is a story that A, needed to be told, and B, to help the Hopi Indians' prophecy get out there and let people know about it?
Yeah. And it's gotten good reviews.
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
Well, it's an interesting book. I read it because I wanted people to read it, so I wanted to make it entertaining.
And keep the message out there too.
Yeah.
It's a book with a message. It's an environmental thriller, and there's a love story in it,
Yes.
and there's serious repercussions for going forward on this path that we still seem to be on, although it has slowed down. You have a website where this is available?
Yes, you go to www.mpmanilla.com.
mpmanilla.com.
Yeah, it's in Amazon.
Manila
They can
is
read the
spelled
reviews.
Manilla. So it's MP, as in Paul, Mary Paul, Manilla. And that's not her name. That's not Mary Paul. But it's just so that they understand what I'm saying. And it's Manilla for Manila. So MP Manilla and at Amazon, and you can buy the book or you can get it from her.com website.
Village of the Arts, the largest artist colony in the state of Florida, located on 42 acres, includes artists, homes, galleries, gardens, and restaurants featuring handcrafted gifts, fine art sculptures, painting, photography, enviro art, healing arts, books, mystics, and musical variety. A few of the galleries are unique in their offerings. Village Voices specializes in books and art created exclusively by Florida residents. The Dancing Crane Gallery offers fine art, custom jewelry, and unique, innovative art. The Village Mystic offers all things metaphysical: meditation, massage, mediums, aromatherapy, psychics, shamans, Reiki healing, and the gem mine, where you can mine for your own personal treasure. Yoga Arts offers classes or one-on-one coaching. Musicians and bands can be found throughout the area. Many of the artists and musicians offer classes. Restaurants and bakeries provide respite for the weary and magic for the foodies. Visit during the first Friday Art Walk and stroll through the shops and galleries enjoying free appetizers, wine, music, and demonstrations. For hours and information, please visit the website at www.villageofthearts.com.